Executive Director of Data Driven Detroit, a social enterprise whose mission is to provide accessible, high-quality information and analysis to drive informed decision-making. After a decade of experience working in Detroit's community development ecosystem, Erica still believes strongly in the power of data to ensure the efficiency of programs that improve quality of life. She has her master's in urban planning from Wayne State University and is a published author in the Journal of Urban Affairs. Please join me in welcoming Erica Raleigh.
I'm going to set this down here so we don't have mishaps. There we go. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Good. All right, so I am Erica Raleigh. I am here to talk a little bit about the work of Data Driven Detroit, some things we've learned along the way, and then hopefully leave you with something that can be helpful for the future moving forward. I left enough time, I think, at the end for any questions and a conversation, so I'd love if, as you're kind of hearing this initial presentation, if you think of any questions, please hold them and let's talk at the end. I love that part. That's my favorite. So Data Driven Detroit is, as mentioned, a social enterprise, but we actually started as a program of a 501c3 in Detroit. And our initial mission was basically everyone around the time of the recession, especially philanthropy, was getting ready to make some tough decisions about which nonprofits and government programs to continue funding. And they had basically no information from which to make those decisions. And our founding director, Kurt Metzger, had been the data guru of the Detroit region for many years. And he was sitting in the room when people were lamenting this, and he said, well, you know, if you had invested in that thing that we talked about for the last 20 years, a central data resource, then you might be able to answer some of these questions and make your decisions a little bit easier. And so finally someone said, okay, great, get that thing started now, even though it's a little bit too late for this current crisis. Maybe it will be helpful in the future. So at the beginning, I was actually the second hire at D3, lucky enough to still be working on my master's degree, but hear about this thing, and I was just harping constantly at the professors about, don't we have data for this? I had a little bit of a background in experimental psychology, like, you can test these things, right? Is this plan working? Is this program effective? Like, we can test for that if we have data. But it was really hard to find, and you had to go to 18 different places, and you guys, I'm preaching to the choir already. So in the beginning at D3, what we were trying to do really was search in this vast emptiness of space to try to find the data. We would go and sit in offices like many of yours, I'm sure, with hard drives and say, can you please copy the assessor's file onto this hard drive for me so that I can do some cool stuff with it for the community? And we were searching everywhere trying to find the good stuff. And then today, we've seen this massive shift in the landscape as technology has improved, as government services have improved around data, that we're just drinking from the fire hose, right? A lot of folks that we work with need data and information, but they're overwhelmed with the sheer amount of data that exists. I'm generating data right now on my own activity. You all are sitting here with cell phones and computers, and all of our work, especially in government and in the nonprofit sector and philanthropy, we're all generating tons of data all the time. And so a lot of our work these days is really about curating that information, organizing it, putting it into a time series or a spatial layer so that we can actually use that information and analysis to help our partner organizations do their work more effectively. Over time, we've evolved as we've had to. So at the beginning, we're really just like, let's get some spreadsheets together because that's what we knew. We're a bunch of data geeks in this organization who tingle at the thought of a spreadsheet and can really see the patterns in there. But when we started working with organizations out in the field, they're like, what do I do with this? It's like a bunch of numbers. This is overwhelming. This is too much information. And so we started doing simple stuff like, what's the poverty rate in the census tract? What does the geography of income look like across our region so that people could start to make meaning of this information? And then we started making visualizations, which people found really exciting, and we got a little over visualization happy for a while there. And we started folding those into profiles and reports and kind of combining the analysis and the narrative alongside the visualizations to help make meaning of the data with our partner organizations. And then these days, we do a lot more work in the custom analysis department as our city government has expanded its capacity to provide open data to the world, which is just amazing. In 4 short years, an open data policy in Detroit has led to hundreds of data sets being liberated from the city on an open data portal. Now we can save ourselves the time of sitting in offices with hard drives and a lot of the cleanup work that we have to do on the data to make it useful. When the data portal launched, actually half of the data sets on there were sourced to Data-Driven Detroit because we had been working with the data for so long and we knew all the caveats, the limitations, the ins and outs, and how do you actually make it into a format that's useful for others outside of government to actually use. So a lot of our work these days is in the custom analysis department, where we partner with individual organizations who are trying to answer a certain problem, a certain question, and we can bring data expertise to their lived expertise of whatever human service program or investment program they're trying to deploy, and really make some meaning of the information. We also run a service on our website called Ask D3. This is essentially, we make tons of online tools. We've made way too many of them, I'm sure, for many years. But there's no one way to answer every single question that exists, right? So Ask D3 is a service where if you have a really specific question or you're searching for a very specific data set that you can't find on our website, if we can answer your question in under 2 hours, we will do it for free. And that has been really helpful over time. Over the course of 10 years, we've amassed a ton of information about what the hot topic of the day is right now, or what is the common question that people are asking, over the course of a year, or common challenges that they're facing, and then we try to use that information to actually build those tools or update features so that it's more useful to a broader section of the community. In our organization, so I mentioned that we started as a 501c3. We're coming up on our 3-year anniversary as a low-profit limited liability company. I took over in 2013 when our founding director retired. And as a 501c3, we were finding that we were able to generate a ton of revenue from individual project partnerships where people had those really specific questions they were trying to answer. And we weren't getting a lot of general operating support from philanthropy. So we figured out a way to kind of sit in between this for-profit and the nonprofit space, the public and the private realm, and now we're able to serve many more organizations and government entities. So we see our work still as being primarily mission-focused, not profit-driven. So we're here to really democratize data and level that playing field. There are individuals and block clubs and community development organizations who don't have the same level of expertise or money, just frankly, as like Google or Dan Gilbert from Quicken Loans. So we want to level that playing field and make sure that everybody has access to the information they need to make good decisions. And fundamentally, we believe that the ability to access that information helps us all make better decisions, and that's an underlying assumption of Data-Driven Detroit's work. This is our mission, providing that information in an accessible, both how do you access this literally, how do I find it, and then also can I understand what to do with it when I've got it. And we want it to be high quality, both information and analysis that drives informed decision making. And then we serve anyone, right? Later in this talk, I'll show you how we make decisions around who we're going to work with, because we have a lot of demand and only 8 staff people. So, but we're open to anyone because, again, it's about democratizing data. And these are our values. So this underpins a lot of our day-to-day activities, how we make choices both externally and internally, and that is really important. I really hope you're not seeing the software thing. Remind me later. Thank you, technology. I also want to mention, particularly to this group, if you have not heard of this network, this National Neighborhood Indicators Partnership is incredible. It sounds very similar to the network that you've developed here. We rely on this network in a big way, both our local network, but also this national network. And you will find many other partner organizations who look and sound like D3 in cities across the country. And you'll see an example from one of them later today. So, humbly, really humbly, because I make mistakes every day, I wanted to share some things that we have learned in the decade of work that we've done, building from that, like, we have almost no data to work with, all the way to we have so much data to work with, we don't know what to do with it. And I wanted to root that in an experience that I share every day with my loving husband, who is a government worker, but from a probably pretty different perspective than most of the folks in this room. And the conversations that we have at home are really fascinating because I work with a lot of IT folks inside the city of Detroit, but I also get to hear about the lived experience of this human as an employee inside the system. So we're gonna drive home some of these lessons today. So, one, start with the right question, right? Is this actually a problem? Are you solving a problem that doesn't exist? Are you asking a question that already has an answer? And make sure it's an actual problem. So, for one example, Jason, Raleigh, comes home and tells me, they came and changed the locks on my door today to the engine house. Why? I don't know. I don't know. They just came and they changed it, and they said that we needed to have a different key. So they changed all of the engine house locks across the entire city to be different keys. And he's like, but when I am on the road and I need to get into the house that I just got assigned to, I can't get in because it's a different key now. So they solved a problem that didn't actually exist. Here's another example from the community development field. Forgotten Harvest is an organization that serves Southeast Michigan, and they pick up food that is being donated from grocery stores or food pantries, and they will pick that up and then they will distribute it out to sites where people have said, I will be a drop-off site, and then folks know where to go to receive that food. And after 25 years of organic growth, they were going through a new strategic plan. They said every time that we've established a new pickup site or a drop-off site, it's literally been because somebody called and said, we can be this for you. So they wanted to take a look at where their sites were, where there were some new potential sites. They've gotten, 25 new sites that are options for them to go and drop off at, and didn't know where the actual need was. So we put together an index of food security for them, along with their policy people, their warehouse people, their truck drivers, their, logistics people, sitting down together and bringing the data to the equation. We were able to construct this index and then map out all of the different sites where they were currently distributing food, and then identify actually a handful of gaps in the region where they were not meeting the need that likely existed. So they are now, for the last year, have been expanding their sites into those areas to meet the areas of need across the region. 2. Has anyone solved this before? This is the big question. That is a link for let me Google this for you. I have to strongly resist the urge to send that out to many people who ask me questions where I'm Googling for you right now. So has anyone solved this problem before? I had a group come to us last year saying, we need a housing policy for the city of Detroit. And I was like, what? 5-minute walk around the office. This is all of the reports that have been written for housing policy in the city of Detroit in the last 7 or 8 years that exists. Hundreds of thousands of dollars have been spent writing these reports, and we have not bothered to implement the actions that are recommended in them, 98% of which match each other. So let's just take a look at what we've already created in terms of our information infrastructure. And then we also, because we're Detroit and probably not for much longer, but at least for the last 5 years, we've been the cool place for all the, especially techies, and I love techies, I am one, to come and say, we have this amazing new thing, it's gonna be great, we're gonna start a new program around it, yay. And then you do a quick Google search. This, for example, Detroit entrepreneurship. This search revealed all of these organizations who are already working on supporting entrepreneurs in Detroit, right? We don't need to start a new program. Maybe we can further invest or further expand the resources that already exist instead of trying to create new organizational infrastructure from scratch, which, as a person who has done this, it's hard and time-consuming and takes a long time. designing with and not for. If I could leave you with literally just one lesson that you bring home, if this is not already part of your culture in your work, and I think that we're seeing this ripple out in many places in government, but it hasn't reached everywhere yet. Remember that you are designing for human beings, and humans don't really like things to be inflicted on them, right? So if you design it together, it can be so much better. If you think about like data as a level setter to start a conversation, I love data, you can actually start from the same sort of ground level together and then design something, a new system, a new program, a new neighborhood, whatever it is, together with the people who will be using that thing, living there, et cetera. And it makes it so much more powerful. And I think that I think a lot about this on the resident side because we're struggling with this right now in Detroit. But I also think about it on the employees side. And if you, let's see, yeah, okay, cool. So back in the day, when fire departments were ordering new rigs for the fire department in Detroit, they had a committee of people who were like, they were the logistics people and the management and you need to hook up technology in there too, of course. We got GPS, it's great. But also the firefighters who live in these houses and know them and know that not every house is exactly the same because we're a very old city with a lot of different old building styles. And the city of Detroit forgot that we engage our employees in these conversations and just ordered a bunch of rigs, millions of dollars worth, many of which did not fit into the houses they were being assigned to. So they had to do a ton of extra construction to make sure that they would eventually fit. What a waste of dollars. There's so much value in including people in the process of design. So, prototyping, user testing. This is a lesson that I've only recently learned in the last couple years. Did not realize how important this was, and I think our first inkling of this was when we were gearing up for a massive citywide parcel survey, so a field survey of all the parcels in the city of Detroit. And it just so happened that when we were asked to do that citywide parcel survey, we were already in the field prototyping in a small neighborhood with a resident group that we had a long-standing relationship with and a lot of trust built up. It was a very low-risk, low-cost test of the new technology we were trying to deploy. And we found a lot of errors in that initial test that enabled us very quickly to pivot in the span of about 2 weeks to doing a citywide parcel survey in 35 days. And we have 380,000 parcels. So that can be a very valuable step. And so that was 2013, learning from that and then partnering with a local university and Microsoft, actually, and then our City of Detroit Department of Innovation and Technology. We actually now steward this network of civic user testers in Detroit based on the Chicago model that was developed by Smart City Chicago. They helped us get it up and running, and now we have about 400 residents who have signed up to participate in user tests. So anytime a new civic app or website or even a data-driven Detroit website, which we were redoing, gets deployed, we can test it with a group of residents first and make sure that it's actually meaningful to them. One of the big values of user testing is can people actually use it? Of course, that is super important. Is this usable for the standard human or someone who's very young, someone who's very old? But also do I care about this? I have developed so many online tools that no one cares about. So we're trying to stop ourselves from doing this at this point. This is a user test for a commercial property tool that the city was developing. And 54% of the people we tested said, this isn't for me. I would never use this. It seems like it's for office people. I wouldn't care about this at all. So that can be really helpful in sort of targeting and tailoring your features or even your topics around. And again, we forget this too. I don't know. So this is sessions and page views. Can anyone tell when D3 launched its new website without user testing? Yeah. That was 2015. That was painful. We have a new website now, thank goodness, earlier this year. But man, that took a long time to get through and get over. But it was pretty brutal. And you can see even the downward trend of traffic. That's because it was terrible. It was really bad. So again, humble lesson giver here. Collecting only what you need. We have a tendency in our network to think that all data is like, any data is better than no data, and then all data is better than just a little bit of data. So like, let's build a scorecard with 180 metrics in it. It'll be great. You can't do anything off of a scorecard with 180 metrics in it. Plus, who wants to maintain that? And then when you actually need to fill a gap in data, when you're like, okay, there is literally nothing in existence that meets this need that we have to understand this program, this service, et cetera. Remember, less is more. Connect it to a useful outcome, especially for the people who are on the front lines collecting this information. And please don't make human beings duplicate data entry. It makes us feel terrible, terrible, terrible. This is not what firefighting looks like, but this is what Jason is expected to do when he gets back from a run. He has to fill out 3 different reports at this point. They're all basically the same information, but it's going into 3 different software systems, none of which actually work very well for the city. So there's still like, we keep the old one because the new one's not working, but we still keep that one because the new one isn't working. And then together, maybe we can get the information that we need, but no one's using that for any decision making. And he's got to do this on one computer with crappy internet and fields of data that they never, ever see the results from. I harken back many times to this day when, everyone know what a census tract is? Great. He doesn't, but he has to fill one out in that form. And I was like, well, what do you put in there? Do you have a map to show you? Like, it's supposed to be the census tract from where the run was, which, by the way, geocoding, right? So he has to fill that in. They all use the same number. They put the same one in every time because it doesn't matter. No one ever cared. No one ever said this is important. It doesn't matter, right? So mind-blowing to me, but also a lesson. This is what happens when they don't know why and when it doesn't connect back to anything that they're doing. It doesn't matter to them. And it clearly doesn't matter to anyone else because they've been doing it for years and no one said anything. So it obviously doesn't matter, right? Measuring what matters, so important, right? Here's one example. This is from the City of Detroit dashboard that our new mayor, love him, he's doing great stuff. But another example of like, hey, humans do weird things sometimes. And I only know this because, again, I get to have this conversation over dinner at night. It's great. They were measuring EMS response time. It was atrocious. It was really sad. If you needed an ambulance to show up in the city of Detroit, you were waiting a long time for somebody to get there. That sucked. So put that metric up on the dashboard. We're going to lower this response time. We're going to do it. Guess how they did it? They cross-trained the firefighters, which in our city were separate from EMS. Same union, different job roles. So, and it's probably because we have lots of fires, but, no matter, we'll cross-train all of the firefighters to be EMTs and forget the equipment that they might need or protective gear, anything like that. We'll send them out on priority 1 calls and get them to stop the clock when they get there, even though they can't transport anyone. They can barely do anything more than stick some gauze on you. And they're not allowed to administer medication, anything like that. But it stops the stopwatch so the response time goes down. So what is it that we actually care about? What are we measuring? And does it actually measure the thing that we care about? Very important. Here's another one around that, understanding what you're measuring. Know the source of the data that you're dealing with, right? There was this report out a couple years ago, and different folks have different opinions on this. I just thought it was a really intriguing example of if you derive data from, let's say, medical billing codes, you would probably see that people are passing away from heart disease, cancer, COPD, suicide, etc. Who's going to put on a death certificate or a medical bill that it was a medical error? No one, right? And so these guys did an analysis of all of the data and then created an estimate of how many deaths are actually from medical errors and put that report out, and it was like, holy cow, is this actually the third leading cause of death in this country? And we haven't been capturing it because the data that we're deriving the information from doesn't have that, it doesn't capture all of the reasons that somebody might die. Data rights, super important. This came up a lot for me in my early research, where I used to be a strong, like, come on, government, let all the data out. It's really important. Just let it all go. It's gonna be great. We're gonna do cool things with it. And the bulk of my research in those days was around public safety, and had some really great conversations with police officers in particular, who were saying to me, we would be re-victimizing victims of sexual assault or domestic abuse if we let you have these data down to the address level and then you publish it. There is something in there. So respecting data rights, I think, is really critical in sort of weighing transparency and privacy. There's this great group, the Detroit Community Technology Project, that's published a bunch of online, they call them zines. I feel silly saying it that way, but that's what they call them. Including, there's a new project called Our Data Bodies, and thinking about how can we as humans control our data, our access to our information, et cetera, and how can we weigh those things responsibly, no matter where we are in society, in our work lives. And so I've been learning a lot lately from those folks. So I've said a couple times today, we've produced a bunch of online tools that like no one actually cares about. So this one is really important to me, and particularly in Detroit, we have a lot of stuff that's like, it's the worst ever. We're the most dangerous place in the world. We're the most lead poisoned place in the world. They're like, we're the worst on a lot of things. And so when I present information to people and they're just like, wow, terrible, so I'm gonna go home and just like die, I guess? I don't know. So we're trying to think more these days about how do we link the data that we're presenting to actions that can be taken. So this is the blood lead level data that I was mentioning, and just trying to like, how do we say like, wow, yeah, there's some lead poisoned kids in your neighborhood, like you should be aware. Here's what you can do about it. Here's access to resources. You can go get tested. You can apply for a grant for remediation, lead remediation, et cetera, so that it's linking to some sort of actionable outcome from knowing that information. Here, I mentioned this earlier. Having a strategy for decisions has been really important for us. And when I talk about this, we call it a strategy screen at D3. And we use it for lots of things, including we have a separate one that's just for, will Erica, as the director of an 8-person team and the owner of this organization, will she go across the country and give a talk to people, right? We have a strategy screen for that. So we ask ourselves a series of questions. So it's not just like, oh, I don't feel so busy right now, or it sounds like fun, or like maybe it's Hawaii. I don't know. No one's ever asked me to come to Hawaii. But we leave this on our office walls so that we can remind ourselves the questions that we need to ask ourselves as a new project opportunity comes in the door. And then here's our digital version, which I'll walk through briefly. So right at the top, does this align with our mission, vision, and values? Everything should be focused through this lens for us. It's not about the money. It is about the work that we're doing and the action that comes from it, the outcomes, the real community improvement that comes from that. And values, I think, are really an important filter for that work. And then we have decided over the years that some people really come in with the answer and they want us to do the work to justify it, but sometimes that's not actually the question that we should be asking. So are they willing to ask the right, quote, right questions? And really that's like, are they willing to shift on that? And then does the partner actually impact how resources flow? And I don't just mean dollars. It's like people energy, or influencing an investment strategy that either city or philanthropy or both of them together are going to deploy. Do they have that responsibility and impact? And then, do we actually have the skills to do it? This has become really important as we've taken on some projects where one person or a half a person is able to do the thing, and then they're like, bye, we're out of here. And then we're left with a contract that we can't fill because we don't know how to do it. The person left. And then if we don't, that's still okay. Do we have a partner or a strategic ally? That can be very helpful, and partnerships to us are very important. We've come across, and I imagine this actually comes up for you all, does it give somebody a political advantage? When Detroit split out into council districts, we had one potential council member come to us and say, I need all of this data for the district that I live in because I want to go and canvass appropriately and make sure that I'm meeting the needs of the people. And we took it through our strategy screen. We said, you know what, the only way that we're going to do this is if we do it for all of the council districts and publish it on the web. That was a really helpful exercise for us, and that question is important because, again, democratizing data, right? And then so that's an example of redesigning the scope to fit that. And then moral conflict. This one has been a little bit squishier for us, but it's an important one for us to ask ourselves. And then making sure that it's actually so when we talk about visibility and strengths, it's really is this part of our core competencies? Should we be doing this as an organization? Because we have a lot of lane confusion in Detroit, and we want to stay in our lane and be very clear about that. And then we get down to, does the funding pay for it, and or can we afford it, right? D3 has yet to make a profit, so in 3 years, we can't afford to take on all the free work in the world. There are too many questions out there, but maybe someday, right? We could do some pro bono work, which would be great. So that's an example of a strategy screen. I've found that other organizations find it pretty helpful to just think those things through and then just have them with you. I mentioned partners, surprise. So I'll give you a quick example on this. For those who hadn't heard before, Detroit has a blight problem. I don't know if you knew. So in 2013, the Detroit Blight Removal Task Force came together, and it was co-chaired by 3 folks, one of whom is a billionaire, nameless. I'm sure he'd love to have his name in here, and 2 more community-oriented folks, someone who'd been working in neighborhoods for a long time, and then another person who had worked with our school system and other amazing jobs in the city. And those 3 together decided they are not enough to make this plan happen. And so brought together, it was probably a table of 40 or 50 organizations that met on a very regular basis, very swiftly. This is just a handful of those organizations. And one of the first questions that they asked themselves was, how much blight is there? Where is it? How much will it cost to deal with it? And no one had the answer. But luckily, because we have relationships all around the city and partnerships are very important to us, 2 folks, one from the Skillman Foundation and one from the Kresge Foundation, who were our incubating funders for D3, were at the table and said, wait, we've created this data resource that I think they can answer it. It will be great. And so they brought us into the room, and we're like, yeah, well, we did a parcel survey in 2009, and it's 2013 now. We know how to do it. We've been pilot testing this new thing for the last couple of weeks, and we think we have a pretty good technology here and a pretty good process. We think we could do it. And they said, great, get started. So we had a couple weeks to prepare. And at that time, we were part of the, I'll say, Michigan Nonprofit Association. It's up here. And we had been partnering with Loveland Technologies on the technology piece. And so, again, value of partnerships, right? We had a couple of weeks to prepare. We needed to hire 120 people from the city. And we leveraged another partnership with Rock Ventures and the Quicken family of companies. They donated a bunch of staff time, volunteer staff time, for drivers to get everyone fanned out around the city, which was great because we only had a couple weeks and liability is a real thing. So we hired 120 people. We trained them all how to survey and how to do it, with some standard in place. And then we hired a quality control team as well to do live quality control as the data rolled in. And in 35 working days, does anyone remember Snowpocalypse year? It was the winter of 2013 to 14. And we finished up in the field on February 7th, and we released a data set 7 days later. And it was fully quality controlled and comprehensive for the entire city, 139 square miles. And it was just another 2 months after that the report came out that is the task force's plan for removing all blight in Detroit in 5 years. And then the Land Bank Authority has actually been using that layer and continuing to update it. The Land Bank Authority being the place now where nearly all of the publicly owned parcels in Detroit resides. They're able to do a demolition, a rehab, and other intervention strategies around that, and then keep the data up to date, which is pretty spectacular. But if we were trying to do this alone, we were maybe a 10 or 11 person organization at the time, never would have happened, right? Partnerships are incredibly powerful, and those long-time relationships can be really beneficial in being able to act quickly in a situation like that. So, last lesson, and then I'm going to tell a little story for the future. It's not that easy, right? None of this stuff is easy. We all know this. So be kind to yourself, to others. Just be nice, right? I try to remind my team all the time, like, we're not perfect. We're not expected to be perfect. No one is ever perfect. And we try to bring that same compassion to our partners and to others that we don't even work with, but give folks the benefit of the doubt, because this stuff is really, really hard. And give yourself the benefit of the doubt. You're trying. I know you are. I believe in you. We're all working for the same good outcomes. So those are my lessons. And then I would try to tell you, using some of these lessons, how we're thinking about moving forward at D3. So I mentioned that we're a social enterprise. We do project-based work. This is how we earn revenue, but we're also trying to steward this public resource of data, information, online tools, and make everything so all of our projects have a public-facing component at the end, so that we're building the community infrastructure and community knowledge. And again, hopefully things like, I don't know, all the housing reports, that people aren't redoing work because they just don't know that it exists. But at the same time, we have to keep earning revenue, and building infrastructure is something that's really hard, especially when the new, hot, flashy, sexy thing comes along, right? And so we've never really gotten a solid grip on that central data engine that should be running everything. It's really just cobbled together as we engage in project work and keep a little bit of the data up to date, and then we got this other thing, and we try to keep that thing up to date, and it's just a crazy mess. The other thing that we've noticed is all of these partner organizations, including some government departments that are not currently publishing to the open data portal, they all have really great data internally that would add to the richness, the granularity, and the timeliness of the data, and put that contextual layer, American Community Survey, and even building permits. Like, we love all of that stuff. It's great. But if we had the organizational data, who are they serving? When are they serving? Who's investing where? All of that information pooled into one place, we could really start to understand a program's sort of but-for impact, right? Or an organization's but-for impact. What's the counterfactual here? If we don't have it all together, we just don't know. So we've come up with this concept of a Metro Detroit Data Alliance, and really thinking about, so it's not just the city, we're a region. There's not some 50-foot wall around the city of Detroit that magically is a barrier between worlds. Like, this is a whole economic region that interacts with one another and has impacts on one another from municipality to municipality. And so a couple years ago, we were starting to map out the D3 network. Who do we work with, and who do those people work with? And really starting to get a grip on that. And this is actually a really cool software called Kumu. Kumu. It's highly interactive, really beautiful, and you can run it from a G sheet. So I keep this thing going all the time, always adding new stuff. It's fun. And then within that, we were starting to notice that there were these groups of people who were calling us and saying, like, we think that we need some sort of shared infrastructure. Like, we think that we need something. So we started adding a tag inside Kumu for just like this concept of a data collaborative. And this is the map of the different tables that we're convening. No need to see the organization names, but essentially you can see that there are some like really big ones and then some smaller ones. And we found this one group, this one table that was convening that seemed to be further along in their conversation than the others. And it was also a longtime partner that was convening that table. And so we thought that they would be a really good low risk, low cost sort of pilot test for the concept. And then we Googled, because you do. And we found out that there is something in Western Pennsylvania called the Regional Data Center, and it was one of our partners in the NNIP network that was doing this concept with the University of Pittsburgh, the city government, and the county government here. And they had set up a legal and governance structure and data sharing arrangement, and also come up with this crazy concept of hiring ETL, extract, transform, load techs, into the university that they could then send out to the different departments in city and county government and inside the university to reduce the burden of organizing the data, figuring out even what was important or helpful to others, organizing it, and then writing a script to bring that data into a central space so that you can avoid duplicate data entry on the part of these human beings. And so we interviewed them, right? I'll be visiting with Bob Graddick later today, who is the head of this center, and interviewed some folks inside city and county government. How's it working? What's going on? What problems have you run into? What do we need to know? And then we started building out a base, and we actually got some Microsoft support to help with the back-end architecture to help build it in a scalable way. This is the first time we've ever done this. I have no idea, but Microsoft does this fun stuff all the time and can think about eventually like thousands of organizations contributing in, even though right now we're designing for 8 organizations to put their data in. And then designing the system together, right? Mapping out, like, these are all of the things that they would want to know in the whole wide world for downtown Detroit. And then can we pick like 1 or maybe 2 of these to start? And then we started prototyping, and we had the architecture. We started working with the individual orgs who, by the way, had been talking for a year already to get on the same page about the fact that they wanted to do this. And then we got 2 data sets from 8 organizations, 2 data sets total, not even like the same data set from every organization. 2 members contributed data to the system, and everyone else is just like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know where it is. It's in like 15 different places. I can't. I don't know. I don't have time. My boss doesn't tell me I need to. La la la. I'm sure you guys have heard this all before. And so this user testing and prototyping, and we did try to do, and it will launch soon, a demonstration project to see if maybe the front face will help like garner some energy around this, because no one understands what a data infrastructure and API, they don't care. But maybe if it's like pretty, then they'll be like, yeah, let me put data in that thing. So we'll see what happens from that. But in the meantime, we've really been checking our assumptions, and we believe that we have overestimated both the willingness and the ability of organizations to share data. Culture eats strategy for breakfast every day, that's a thing, right? But also, like, even ability is actually a big deal, right? If you're not managing your data internally in a way that is actually shareable, useful at all, or then why are you doing it? I don't even understand. Why are you doing it if you're not using it? But also, like, we can't expect anyone to share data if it's on paper or in 15 different spreadsheets, or if like that silo over there is doing it one way and that silo over there is doing it a different way. It's just not going to be useful. So we are now rethinking our strategy, and have just gotten some funding to kick this off for 18 months, and we'll see how it goes. So essentially we're thinking of an Ask D3, but in person. There's a new nonprofit center that's going to be starting in Detroit in November, and it's this foundation that has this kooky idea that if you have a space where nonprofits can go to get, support on their accounting, or, any back-end services, or classes on how to, do data better, or anything else that nonprofits might need, that maybe we would improve the system, at least on the nonprofit side, and make them more effective partners with government, with philanthropy, and with one another. So there's this center that's opening. So we're going to run an Ask D3 service out of that center, and then use that to sort of triage into 3 different tracks. So one is the quick wins. We can do quick wins in person. Oh, you need a map for that? You want to bring a map to your community meeting? Oh, you just need this online tool that already exists. We'll get you that. Quick, get you in and out the door. You're happy. You know what you're doing. There's another one that's the one-on-one coaching, right? So it's a bigger question than we can answer in 2 hours. Or like that resource doesn't exist yet, but let's work on creating it together. That can be another pathway. And then some organizations we might find are actually data ready, right? They got their stuff together internally, they're rocking and rolling, they understand what a spreadsheet is, what a mapping software is, like they get it, and maybe they're ready to start participating in this data alliance. And then using the common challenges that people come across and the common questions that people come up with, can we use common questions to augment the toolbox, the resources that people need? Because technology becomes a really great solution if you have people asking the same question over and over and over again. Make a widget for that, make a tool for that, that's cool. Sometimes it's common challenges in process, in user testing. Like there are some common things, and we can actually develop a curriculum around that. And then the hope is we can use both of these strategies to really build the capacity in our community to do this work more effectively. And then maybe 20, 30 years from now, we'll have enough data in that data alliance that we can start answering the real impact questions, do cool things like pay for success models and stuff like that. But in the meantime, we're helping people with their immediate needs and then also building for the long-term future of our community. And that's the hope. So our data university draft is this so far. I'm putting this up here. This literally got created by our team 2 days ago, and I'm putting it up here because I thought maybe there's some folks in the room who would have some comments on this and might have some suggestions for us. So here we go. Data 101. What's up with that? More hands-on, like why do I even care about this? Start there. Then moving into critical thinking. How do I ask good questions? How do I actually apply this? How do I think about data quality and where I'm accessing the data and what the limitations of that data set are? Am I understanding what I'm measuring? And then getting into some methods and analysis. I have found so many people in the last 5-10 years who, if they just knew a single formula in Excel, they would save themselves 20 hours a week of work, right? Can we do a quick Excel and then maybe revert them over? Microsoft has a really great cities program where they will teach nonprofits how to use these things. And so we're going to see if we can divert some folks who have greater needs in that arena into that course. And then really, like, how do I make sense of the data? How am I going to use this? How do I calculate a percent? Also a thing that people struggle with. And then data tools. There are mountains of tools out there, mountains of places to access information. They're not all easy to use, but we can actually give some instruction around those. And then trying to using this, so if we're kind of going down, this is course 5 is data to action. In course 1, we're going to ask them to do time tracking on themselves. So we expect that this will not be executive directors of nonprofits or like high up folks inside city government, but rather like the sort of day-to-day, like real, managers, directors, and some like worker bees who actually do the stuff day to day, right? We're going to ask them to time track their own days. And we think that this is a great application because we use this data at D3 all the time. We've been time tracking intensively since 2011. We track time to every single project, whether it's an external one or an internal one. Our website redesign, for example, cost oodles of money, more than we budgeted for it, just from our own internal folks working on the website. We've gone over budget on projects to the tune of 3 times the initial project cost. We know this, so we know that next time we do a project like that, we should build in a little more money. We also have used it for things like, we locked up 40% of our available capacity into internal meetings. Who does that? That happens. There's a pendulum swing. I've watched it for a decade. We go, oh my gosh, we're spending too much time in meetings. And then we get over here and we're like, holy crap, we're not communicating at all. We need to at least meet once in a while. And then we do that back and forth. And we use the time tracking data to try to bring the two ends of the pendulum closer together and just try to operate in a more smooth fashion. So we think that might be a good exercise for people to actually have a practical application of using data that they really understand, that they collected themselves, they know how hard it is to collect it, and then actually use that to answer some questions or to identify any issues in their day-to-day lives that they might not have noticed without the data. And then finally, bringing data to life. This is a question we get from a lot of organizations, like, how do I make a map? How do I, make some pretty visualizations? I need to fundraise. I need to market. I need to convince my funders that this is important. I need to storytell on my website or in my social media feed, and I'm trying to juggle all of these things. I'm wearing 15 different hats, and I don't know how to do this stuff. This is crazy, and I can't always just be calling you. So we're going to teach some people some easy-to-use data visualization tools, and then some concepts around storytelling using data. So that is what we're looking for in our future, and hoping that eventually someday I can come back and say, we totally did it. That would be great. And then I'd just like to leave you with this. Just remember, one, again, take care of yourselves and each other. Remember the power of networks, of the human capacity that exists in the world, in your teams, in your resident base. And remember that behind each data point is a living, breathing human, right? We're, at the end of the day, this is all about people. I know you're here to serve people. You're trying to do good work, and we're all trying to do good things for the world. And remembering that there's a human back there is really important. So that is me for today. Well, thanks. I am up for it. Looks like I'm a little bit early. We have time for questions, talk, conversation. Great. She's ready.
You can hear me? Oh, yeah, now it's on. All right. Anybody have questions for Erica?
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering if you were going to put any of the Data University course information up online for us newbies here.
Absolutely. We
That would
will.
be
And
really
I will
good.
mention that we're actually drawing on our network. We did an inventory of all of the NNIP partners. A year ago, everyone submitted all of their workshops and trainings that they've developed into this shared infrastructure. So we're actually going to be borrowing from their past work and our own past work, and then we'll also be publishing that. And then we're hoping to work with the U of M School of Information to develop eventually a tandem sort of online version of those courses. So we've set it up as an agile development process, so we actually want to test the curriculum as we're deploying it and then refine it over the course of probably 3 semesters, rolling semesters, and then use the lessons learned to retool it, and then we'll be ready to do the more online, like interactive online piece. Yeah, thank you.
Put your hands up so I can see you. Remember, I'm short.
Yeah, cool. Everyone's so quiet. Wow.
There we go.
We used it's a SaaS called Harvest. We evaluated a bunch of them. There are actually a handful out there, but Harvest was the one with the most intuitive interface for us, and also let us be flexible in terms of our tasks that we could put underneath different projects. And then also let us, we have a tiered billing structure in our organization, so I bill out at a different amount than, say, a entry-level employee. And let's see, really important, we started in Excel. That's what we did for 4 years. We were in Excel, and we would merge them into a central database where we could, do some fun stuff with it. But Harvest just makes it way easier.
I actually have a question.
Cool.
I'm really fascinated by your decision making. Is that something that you would be willing to share?
Sure, it's public. Totally. I will share it. I'll send the link to where that's at.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I have a belief in transparency. It's one of our values. There you go.
So what drives your data collection? Is it do you have a specific project in mind when you're going after data? Because in every organization, there's data that's maybe important to the public and data that's not.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
how do you sift through each side and weed out the bad and only keep the good?
Yeah. It's evolved a lot over time. I think at the beginning we were just in a mad scramble to get whatever we could find, which is not super effective. It's not time effective anyways. So these days we're looking more at if we've had common questions from folks, we will try to build a data infrastructure around that and be very deliberate about what we're gathering. Or if we have a project that we're partnering on, let me think of a recent example. So we were working with the Hope Starts Here initiative, which is its own special thing. It was like that giant table of folks in the weird alien-looking network map. That table was coming together to try to create a strategy to support kids in the city. So from cradle to age 8, we have some other folks that work on the later years. And really trying to understand the entire system that impacts kids, everything from mental and physical health to early learning centers to community development and blight and so on, like neighborhood characteristics. So it was actually co-created with a bunch of different strategy teams around each topic area, and then we would sit in each conversation, hear what the needs were, what the common questions and common needs and common curiosities were in each of those conversations, and then try to go and research what's available, what doesn't exist, and then where might we, if, again, the community decides it's important to meet that gap, where the gaps exist and how it could be filled. So like that's a massive project for us, one of our bigger ones, and they have not yet pulled the trigger on, great, go and get all the data. So it's still in the creation stage, and I think they're also working through some challenges in process. We'll call it process, yes. So there's a lot of, we're going to get all of the indicators and we're going to make a dashboard and it's going to be great. And it's not the thing that's going to solve the problem, right? So, yeah, I try all the time to manage expectations around, like, data. It's not some magic thing that solves all of the things, right? Sometimes you got to take a step back and think about what that outcome is that you're seeking and then bring data to the equation. So, yeah, they're in that phase right now.
Hi. This may be too personal, but I'm wondering what drives you personally to be so passionate about this topic.
Oh, man. Well, I think that we can make it work. I'm a numbers lady. I love it. I love people. I do. I have to remind myself that there are humans behind all the data. But I just I've just always loved math. I think it's really precise and perfect and beautiful. And so bringing sort of the messy world to heal a little bit with data makes me feel better about the world. But I also, I grew up in and around Detroit, and I was lucky enough to have two great parents who didn't live together but really were supportive of myself and my sister and made sure that they made good choices around where they were living so that I could go to great schools, so that I could grow up with the knowledge that I would go to college and then eventually get a master's degree. And I lived around a lot of people who did not have that. And so I understand that I am very lucky and very, very privileged to be in the spot where I am. And I feel compelled to bring that knowledge back to my community to help others have better life outcomes. There are a lot of folks, and also trying to remember that humility in that is really important. Acknowledging culture and history and the desires of the residents themselves, that my values are not necessarily theirs. And so I try to bring my passion to places where it's wanted. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then somehow in all of this, I really, really believe in the power of data infrastructure that's locally rooted, that, is not, I love the American Community Survey. I think it's great. It's awesome to have a national data set so we can compare to one another. But I also understand that there are massive limitations to federal and sometimes even state data sets, and that we can bring local knowledge, local context to bear, and also some very specific local data sets to augment that information and make it more useful and more powerful for folks who are just trying to get by and try to do good things for the world. And if they just had a little bit of information or a little bit additional information, that they could do it more effectively. There's so much energy in and around Detroit, all around the country. People are trying to do great things. And if I can help them be just a little bit more effective, be a little bit faster, a little bit stronger, then I feel like I'm doing something helpful for the world. Yeah. I can talk a little bit about, so that's me personally. I think also organizationally, we are a small team these days, and we are also in this weird space between the nonprofit and the for-profit realm, and we are in the final stages of devising a structure for a worker ownership model for the organization. And currently I own it. I didn't own it on purpose. It was a 22-month process to negotiate our departure from the 501c3 we were in into a standalone entity. And in that process, we thought that we were going to have 3 equity investors that would sort of take on ownership and board responsibilities for the organization. And at the last minute, just after I filed the press release, essentially saying we're doing this, they all stopped answering the phone. So I ran to our business consultant and said, "Holy crap! This is announced. I need to file the paperwork to make this thing real before someone snags the name or the entity from the state of Michigan." So I just went and filed it with my name on it with my own personal check to register the company. And then those people, even though they have now engaged in a lot of project work with us, they still are like, we don't want to own that. We're not going to do that. So I own it right now, which was not the point. And I also have been through multiple dramatic transitions with D3, and I just know how painful it is and I don't know how people do it in government, honestly, because every time leadership changes, or your structure changes in the slightest way, it's upheaval. And that is a lot of human energy that gets dumped into that stuff, that turmoil, that transition. So I've been there through migrating from one 501c3 to another. That was painful. 6 months later, our founding director left. And I had 10 minutes to decide if I was going to be the interim director or not. The 501c3 that we were in said, it's either you or, what are you going to do? And I was like, I guess I'm running this now. And then, and both of those were painful. And then the transition out to the L3C was its own shakeup, right? There's a lot of time and energy that goes into that. And so I think a lot about, the conversations that people were having with me when our founding director departed, like, oh, can these guys even do it? Do you even know what you're doing? I've never seen this chick before. What is she going to do? We need more seasoned thought leadership in the head position. And so, I've just been plodding along trying to build not just my own skill set, but the skill sets on my team, and making sure that we are being really thoughtful and intentional about both every single hire, but also professional development internally. And then I think a lot about, maybe someday I love this stuff, but maybe I don't want to do it forever. Or maybe I win the lottery and want to move to Fiji, because that's a possibility. But I believe in this organization so much that I don't want to put it in a position where if I leave, God forbid, get hit by a bus or something, I don't want the organization to collapse just because this face is no longer at the head of it, right? So this conversion to worker ownership is actually really important to us, both in terms of the long-term nature of the organization, but also for every single person in the organization to feel the same sense of ownership that I do. That I had a lot of weight put on me very quickly, but I know that drove me to be stronger, better, faster, to work harder, not more, but harder. and to also take care of my teammates. And so we have a great crew right now, and they are all excited about this conversion. So we're working on our operating agreement and have been making decisions about the structure collectively, using a process called, or a method of, it's sociocracy. I don't know if this is a common term, but essentially for making decisions, we reach consensus by making sure that everyone has a voice in that decision making, and gets the chance to amend or consent to any proposal that's put on the table. And it's been a great process. It's a long process, but a great process to ensure that we're all learning together what does it mean to be an owner, so that when we all sign that piece of paper together, that we all have a shared understanding of what it means, what the responsibility is, and what the benefits are of being co-owners of this amazing public resource that we steward. Fun times. So the question is around creating a dashboard and sort of the process and bringing others in. So it's funny because I'm in a privileged spot where I can just say, no, I'm not going to create that for you, right? I will not take your money for that, thanks. So I have a slightly different thought process, but this has actually come up probably 3 times in the last year where there's a mandate to create one. And so my advice would be to start by asking why. Why are we creating it? Who's the audience, right? And if it's literally like the mayor says that we have to do it, cool. Let's just do it. Let's get it done. I don't even know if I would bother at that point to engage other stakeholders, especially if there's a timeline on it. But if you do have the time to do it and you think that you have the possibility of making this useful to others outside of the 1 or 2 people who are already starting on it, I would say, do you have like a nonprofit community locally? Like, they might actually have some thoughts on what would be useful to them. And I think that you could using some publicly available data sets, get to a place where like, oh, that would actually be helpful. One of the things that seems to help a lot is to actually disaggregate by geography. So to not just have the pie charts, because everyone loves them, or the numbers, the 5 simple numbers, but to also have a map that shows the spatial variation, because a lot of community groups have trouble accessing that information for their own neighborhood and understanding where to focus their own efforts. So like that could be a thing that comes up in the conversation. I try to ask questions, lots and lots of questions. It does help. And then let's see. If it's publicly available data that is maybe not so useful, any way that you can make it more useful to folks, that can help. And again, questions help you get there, right? Yeah, dashboards. Somewhere on the NNIP web, we did a whole session 2 or 3 meetings ago that was, so you've been told you're going to make a dashboard. So I can maybe make that resource available. It's a good couple of decks of just like trying to make it more useful, because we have a lot of people who are excited about dashboards.
Yeah, it's hard to listen to you be so passionate about it, because it's like, can you give me something simple that's like, there's all this stuff back here that we could show people.
Yeah.
It's so helpful, but they kind of just, I think they're asking for all of this, but they're not asking it and resourcing it, but they're giving us this little bit here.
Yep. Yes, exactly. It is absolutely a common problem.
So another question. You and your organization seem to exist in between the level of government and activist, and I may be overgeneralizing. I work with state-level open data, and the challenge of getting political and agency leadership to understand the value of opening up data to the hacker community. Do you have any advice on how to ease that trend? We've rebranded the hackathon as a data challenge,
Nice.
which helps. But I want to find ways to convince people who are political by nature that other people know better than we do, and we should just give them data and see what they do with it.
I can't even tell you how many hundreds of hours of our team's time went into those conversations for the first several years of our existence. Culture, and having the constant reinforcement of that starts to you're planting seeds, right? It takes time, a lot of time. I cannot believe how much time, but that helps. Other examples, or I always find that people are pretty excited about things that don't come from our zip code or area code. So anytime that you can find an example and be like, look at this awesome thing that they're doing over here, wouldn't that be cool? Look at how great it is. Look at the problem that they solved. That can help, as long as, so for us Midwesterners, do not pick San Francisco or New York. It does not help. But anybody else. There's some cool stuff going on out in Denver right now. There's really cool stuff. Obviously, there's some stuff going on in Pittsburgh. There's even I had to refer back to this so many times that it's so amazing that I don't remember the list anymore. But on the NNIP website, there's a "So you got to convince government folks to liberate data" list, right? And a lot of it is like fear of putting it out there, fear of appearing to not have it under control, fear of it being messy, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. And so systematically for us, we were kind of poking into government, and then eventually, we got enough government stuff out that it was helpful, but we found that working with partner organizations outside of government and demonstrating the usefulness of that could be really convincing for folks. And then we got really, really lucky in that Mayor Duggan spoke with Beth Niblock from Louisville and drove down there after begging her to work for him. He drove down and convinced her to come back and work. And her stipulation for coming there was, you will have an open data policy within 6 months of my landing in Detroit. So we got lucky in that respect. So I can't say we fully changed the culture, but we had gotten a lot out before that happened. More examples. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. I empathize.
Howdy from, hello, okay. Howdy from Denver.
Hi.
In relation to that, partners, you said partners. We actually partnered with Galvanize. Partner with the schools.
Nice.
And get them to help you. Now, to be fair, our data has actually fallen a little bit as far as open data because of resource constraints, and we have to rebuild the whole platform. Yay!
You got to start over with all the lessons that you've learned, right?
Yeah,
Yay.
my rule is we'll get there when we get there. Very parental rule. Our challenge right now is, and we have somebody helping us in our department, but it's one guy. We're starting to use Power BI to visualize our data. No. Yeah, he does help. We're a 2-person team for the website of Denver Gov. Yeah.
Wow.
Plus our 35 external websites and 45 applications roughly. And those are just the custom ones. We've got vendor ones. Yeah, it blows my mind. But anyway, so our challenge is now all of these people in our agencies have no idea what they're doing yet. They need training. But there's so many different elements to this, everything from the security and data integrity, and we've got a whole separate security team who is really overzealous. And so they're actually inhibiting the process. Not that I don't respect security, but there's a limit.
Yep.
So I'm wondering, have you met people who are trying to take a lot of their data and create a single process or method for using that data properly? I noticed some of your visualizations are nice. I'm wondering, do you guys do those visualizations yourself? Do you hire out? Like, how do you get your hands around that part?
Yeah. So there's the process and then the visualization question. So on visualization, we actually do a ton of it in-house, and we also partner with others. We like working with allies. They're great. It's hard to keep up on all the tech because there's new stuff popping up all the time. Like, we've actually been playing with Power BI, trying to use it more for drawing our own internal data from the different APIs. So we have this software as a service that we use for our time tracking, and then we have QuickBooks Online, and we've got all this other. So trying to create an organizational dashboard that's effective for managing ourselves. It doesn't do all of the things that we wanted it to do, but it's a nice thing to experiment. We try to dog food first, test on ourselves before we recommend it to others. But we're tool agnostic. We try to stay that way so that it's whatever is, what are we trying to achieve, who's the audience, and then who's going to be the one who has to manage this moving forward. That framework helps us think about the different technology that we might use. So sometimes it's just like, we're going to create graphs for you in Excel, and you're going to dump this thing down into the bottom the next time you have an update of the data, and it's going to refresh in the graphics, and then they can manage that. That's great. We're going to be re-experimenting with Tableau again to see if that's helpful for ourselves and then therefore for others. We got a demo from CartoDB a little while. So like we're always searching for the latest because it moves so quickly, and we try really hard to not invest all of our eggs in one basket and to not invest in a way that we get stuck in a platform. We have to be I know you guys know this, super nimble, and also like we can't have long-term legacy costs. The only thing that we pay for that we're kind of locked into is Esri. And we're lucky enough to get the nonprofit pricing for that. So because of our pre-existing relationship, which is lovely. So that back-end infrastructure at least is solid. And then we can play with lots of other front-end facing things. And then on the process side, this is the conundrum of my life. So I think we're redoing our internal process for data management ourselves, and then also trying to help organizations get better at that. A lot of folks actually hire us to do that for them. So I don't know. My hope is that through this data university that we can start to build that capacity and in more humans, because that's the other thing is the organizations are not static. The humans move. And so if you teach one person in there and then that person goes to another job, then you've lost that capacity on that team or that organization. So if we can build enough knowledge in the community, maybe even if they are jumping around, we'll still have enough leftover capacity internally to do that appropriately. So yeah, it's hard. Be kind, right? It's hard stuff. My last lesson used to be there's no silver bullet, and I can't stand the violent analogy, so I changed it. But really, there's nothing magic here that we can just flick a button but sharing knowledge. I mean, you guys have a ton of knowledge in this room too. I bet someone could even answer that question better than me, where it's worked better for them. But right now, I struggle with a lot of nonprofits who are under-resourced, under capacity, running around trying to do all the things for all the people, working stupid amounts of hours a week, and they're like, data management process? Piss off, Erica. That's what they would say. Yeah. So, yeah. Wow. Cool. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Anything else? Anything you want to ask your colleagues or friends in the room? I can back off the microphone here. Cool with that. Good. How is it 10:20 already? Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Who thinks that you're doing it right?
How firm is sort of? The small percentage of things that we're doing in the state of Delaware, we do have good open data, but it's a small percentage of things.
Do you chat or forum or Spotify or anything like that?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, I'll be speaking on it a little bit this afternoon.
There you go. He's speaking on it this afternoon for the folks in the back who didn't hear. There you go. Cool.
Don't show up though, because I'm terrified.
Well, recall that, so now I am thinking more about teams and high performing teams and how to make everyone work together. And I'm also like the primary salesperson and the person who's like trying to move the 4D chessboard forward into the future for all of the different entities that are doing great stuff in Detroit. So I don't have any technical chops anymore. So I'll come hang out and learn from you. That would be great. Cool. Good. Thanks.